everybody. Welcome to the third day of the HRcoreLAB Summit 2022. Welcome back here online. Today will all be about people analytics, an amazing subject, new to some of you, and some of you may be very seasoned professionals in the area of people analytics. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers, so you will be inspired for sure. I promise you that. My name is Sjoerd van de Heuvel. I'm an associate professor at the University of Applied Sciences in Utrecht, where I focus on data-driven business and people analytics. Hope to hear a lot from you in the Q&A, for example. So ask all of your questions, all the questions you would like to the speakers, and meet with them. Get connected on LinkedIn. I'm not alone here, not at all. I'm moderating today's day of the summit together with Dirk Juncker. We in the Netherlands say Dirk, so just choose whatever you like. And we say David Green. So for those who don't know you, I can really not imagine that. But David, who are you?
I'm some English guy. No. Seriously, so David Green, one of the partners at Insight 222, which a firm we set up nearly 5 years ago now. We're in our 5th year. Co-author of Excellence in People Analytics with Jonathan Farrar's a book we published last year. And I've been in the space, people analytics space, about 8 years, and HR since the late 1990s. So I'm probably the oldest person of the moderators, I suspect. So that's me.
That could be. Thank you so much. And please, let's get connected with David. He shares a lot of fascinating stuff on LinkedIn. So be up to date all the time. And then we also have Dirk Jonker. Dirk, great to see you here. We know each other for quite some years already. Great to be here together. Who is Dirk Jonker?
Well, thanks, Sjoerd, and thanks for having me as the co-chair for today. My name is Dirk Jonker, founder of Cruncher, a self-service people analytics platform. I started my career really as a mathematician in HR strategy consulting and got super interested in using workforce data to show companies what's happening and to support them in decisions on the intersect of strategy, business, and talent. So that's me. People also call me Data Dirk.
Data Dirk, indeed. That's also, I think, your Twitter account, right?
Yeah, I don't use that that much anymore, but indeed, yes.
Indeed. All right. Excellent. Hey, we mentioned the word already several times, people analytics. And of course, there are other labels around, HR analytics, workforce analytics. It may be confusing, but we also should understand what it is. And especially because what I noticed in the previous editions that many people joined the summit also for the very first time. And also still today, after what will it be like 10 years of people analytics, still people are embarking on the journey of people analytics. So Dirk, what is it actually, at least according to you, people analytics?
Well, sure, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's different flavors of analytics in HR. I mean, we have HR analytics, which is all about HR process optimization. We have people analytics that tries to understand individual behavior, and workforce analytics that really looks at group dynamics. And then, of course, there's different techniques of how you can do this, you know, from dashboarding to super advanced predictive analytics, and a lot of buzzwords in between. But I would say rather than saying this is people analytics and this is not people analytics, almost making it like an exclusive club, my message for today really is to welcome different perspectives and listen to get inspired. I mean, we together with the hundreds and hundreds of people in the call already, we are the people analytics community and everyone is learning.
Yeah,
and I mean, remember, I mean, we cannot be successful with predicting who might leave the company if there's no fundamental trust and love with the data that we have. So it does start with working on data quality and dashboarding. So let's help each other by sharing.
Nice. Trust and love with the data you have. All right, that's amazing. And I'm also thinking like you should also use the terminology that works well in your organization, right? And perhaps that is the reflecting the current state. Like I remember Marielle Zonneberg at a conference where we were together. She said like we have an increasing amount of robots in the workplace. So therefore we should call it workforce analytics because it's about people and about robots. So that could also make sense. But Dirk, since we know this area now for about 10 years or so, I think it's really popular for 10 years now. How do you see organizations embarking on this journey called people analytics?
Yeah, I mean, many people and many companies are at different stages, and that is okay. Everyone is learning again. It's quite interesting. We are in a second wave of research of understanding how people and how companies embark and embrace people analytics to really make this work. And we do this together with the Amsterdam People Analytics Center of the University of Amsterdam. And we've analyzed hundreds and hundreds of data points of people analytics practitioners. And all data shows that people follow a very personal path. So that a personalized way of adoption is super important. So therefore, again, my call to the community, who are all on the call, let's share as a community, be super open and honest about what is working, what is not working. And that actually might be super interesting to ask David, because David, I think you're working with a ton of different people analytics teams. Yeah. And you hear a lot of challenges that companies try to overcome. What are some of the challenges that you hear about today compared to, for example, last year or 2 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be talking in a minute around where we see the kind of shift in people analytics from a focus on solving problems for HR to solving problems for the business. And I think the two key challenges that we see, and there are more than two, of course, you mentioned data quality and as still a challenge for some organizations. But I think the two main ones to overcome are, know your stakeholders within the business, understand their challenges, and focus the work on those most important challenges of the business. As I said, those challenges will be different in different organizations. And then the second one, which I know is something Madhura Chakrabarti from Syngenta is going to be speaking about this morning, is upskilling HR. You can build a great people analytics team, and you will have some success with that. But if you really want to scale that on a kind of continuous basis, then you do need to look at capability building across HR. So for example, Dirk, if you're using technology such as Cruncher, it's so important that HR professionals are able to have those conversations with the business and really help them, benefit from some of the insights that your tool and others provide.
Yeah, it's exactly this super beautiful triangle of value, right? It is, doing the right prioritization, so focus on those $1 million questions, having, of course, good tooling in place, but then also, of course, making sure this is going to work, and capability and upskilling is absolutely part of this. Totally agree.
I was looking at the book I have from David, because the 9 dimensions model, I think, is really so if you haven't heard about the model, I think browse it also on the website of Insight 22. Oh, there it is. Of course. So
it's always on the desk.
No, but really, I think there are, of course, more models or frameworks, but again, this critical mindset of today is crucial, I guess, for sure. What do we take out of today, David? What should the participants take out of today?
I think it's a great opportunity to learn. You're going to hear from some of the leading practitioners in the field. And I think one of the things that will become clear, I suspect, is that each of those practitioners is focusing their work on some of the big challenges facing their organization. So I think you can be inspired by what you hear, but always apply it in the lens of your own organization. And I think as Dirk said, don't think you've got to do the most sophisticated analytics. You don't necessarily need to do that. Understand the problems you're trying to solve, and sometimes you can solve that with a very simple report that provides great insights. So yeah, I think plenty of opportunity to learn and be inspired by the growth of the field.
Yeah, I think so, and I would add to that, just allow yourself to be completely lost, completely confused. I remember a professor in the Netherlands, he once said to a student, like, my core job is to confuse you. I really like that, because something good comes from that, right? And also in terms of tailoring it to your own organization, and be critical. I think it's a crucial 21st century skill that we should develop, because then we are also better in solving problems. Okay, guys, I think we set the scene a little bit. So
I am excited, Stuart.
Let's get started, right, Dick?
I am super excited. I mean, I have this tickling in my stomach. Super looking forward to all the beautiful presentations today. And it's an absolute total honor to announce to you the first speaker of today. You all know him, David Green, who will highlight trends, share insights on what leading companies are doing. And I'm very looking forward to hear some case studies. David, the floor is yours.
That's great. Thanks, Dirk. Thanks, Sjoerd. And looking forward to hearing from you both today. as well. So welcome everyone. For those that missed the introduction, it's an absolute pleasure and an honor to kick off HRcoreLAB today, and I want to congratulate Michael and the Teneo team on their 10th birthday, and hope that we'll all be together in Barcelona next year for the 11th birthday. So I'm David Green, as I said in introduction, been in HR for 20 years and in people analytics for the last 8, and my God, has people analytics changed in the last 8 years. I'm one of the founders of Insight 222, and I'm responsible for our people analytics program, which is delivered now to over 90 global companies. I'm fortunate to spend time with people analytics leaders, chief human resources officers, and help them create more business value and impact from people analytics. And we also do a lot of research as well in this field, and I'll be sharing some insights from that today. And just to kind of start really and hopefully inspire everyone here, in my 20 years, over 20 years in the HR field, I don't think there's ever been a more exciting time to be in HR, and I don't think there's been a more exciting time to be in people analytics as well. We are center stage in our organizations at the moment, and that creates expectation, but it also creates opportunity, and I think there's a really great opportunity for us to follow on that. So I am clicking my slides forward, hopefully. Let's see. That's not sure if it's moved yet. Oh, it has moved forward. Here we go. Sorry. Technology, never my strong point. So I host the Digital HR Leaders podcast, and I get to speak to some of the smartest people in our field. And recently I interviewed Kathleen Hogan, who's the Chief People Officer at Microsoft. And this quote that she gave during that conversation really highlights, I think, that opportunity that I just spoke about for HR professionals and the responsibility we have as HR professionals, and people analytics practitioners, to help our leaders, our managers, and our employees, our workforce as well, to harness data productively, so that it's actually having a positive impact on the business and a positive impact on the workforce as well. So today, as I said, no, it has moved. Today, I'll be drawing on research from Excellence in People Analytics, which is the book I co-authored with Jonathan Farrar, my colleague at Insight 222, which was published last year. We kind of look at the history and future of people analytics in the book, break down our model, the 9 dimensions, but there's also 30 case studies in there as well. I'll be highlighting a couple of those today. And I'll sprinkle in some findings from the research that we published last October, our annual research people analytics trend, which really focus around the data-driven culture for HR. So you can access the study in the link there, and you can also find out more about the book in the link there as well. So let's start by diving into a couple of findings from the research. So firstly, people analytics is growing significantly. So first of all, on the screen there, you'll see that, one of the questions we asked people analytics leaders, over 100 global organizations that participated in the study. One of the questions we asked, do you expect to grow the team in the next 18 months? And 75% said yes, 24% thought their team would stay the same, and only 1%, which was one company, said that they thought their team would shrink. But they were just about to divest a third of the business. So actually, in subsequent conversations, the actual team that remains will grow as well. The next one we see is that, again, people analytics is becoming more important in the organization. One of the ways you can tell that is through the reporting line. So 89% of the people analytics leaders that participated in this now, they either report directly to the CHRO or to a member of the HR leadership team. And that has evolved over the years, where people analytics was sometimes buried somewhere quite deep in the HR organization. Being close to the CHRO and the HR leadership team is really important in terms of the type of work you're doing, but also getting investment to grow the function as well. We also found that people analytics leaders are in demand. So 35% of people analytics leaders that participated in this study had changed role in the previous 12 months. And you only have to go on LinkedIn to look at the number of roles in people analytics as a whole that are being hired at the moment. And one thing that was quite interesting as well, I remember that this research was conducted, in the middle of the pandemic last year. we found that for every people analytics professional in these organizations, there is one people analytics person to 2,900 employees. When we conducted that same survey 12 months before, it was 1 to 4,000, which shows that people analytics teams have undergone significant growth relative to the size of the organization in the past 12 months. So again, I'd expect that number to get even more prominent over the next year or so. And it was interesting. It shows it's a good time to be working in people analytics, and certainly it echoed some of the research that Jonathan and I did for the book. So as I said, one of the things that we looked at in the book is the history of people analytics. I always think you need to understand how something has evolved to understand how something is going to move forward in the future. And people analytics isn't new. It hasn't been called people analytics for over 100 years, but we've been doing analyzing some data related to people in the organization since the work of Frederick Taylor back in the early 1900s. But what Jonathan and I saw as we looked at the research was that pandemic had kind of tipped people analytics into the next era. We called it the age of value, and it became clear really that it really had moved forward. And it was what we saw with this is it was a shift from people analytics that was predominantly focused on HR to people analytics that was focused on the business. So, i.e., we're trying to use our people analytics, direct our people analytics work to solve problems that the business has got. And obviously we saw that during the pandemic, understanding things like employee experience, employee well-being, but also things around business continuity as well. So one great example that we saw with an organization in the US, big pharma distribution company, was that they used their people analytics and they were able to predict within a few days when their distribution center on the East Coast would need to shut down. So they are able to put contingency plans in place to make sure that the pharmacies and hospitals on the East Coast that were usually served by that distribution center would be serviced by other distribution centers as well. So quite impactful. And actually interesting, as part of the research, as I said, we did last year, we asked an open question, where are the 3 areas that people analytics is adding the most value in your organization? And this was the top 5 that came back. And I think what's interesting there, if we look at diversity and inclusion, we look at workforce planning, we look at employee engagement and listening, what had previously been maybe HR focused issues are now ones that transcend HR and business issues. You ask CEOs in most organizations what they're worried about. Employee well-being is one, diversity and inclusion is another, workforce planning, have we got the right people that we need to execute on the business strategy? So all things that are really having a big impact on the business, then business and strategy topics as well. So this would be things like managing risk, managing compliance, sales effectiveness, customer outcomes. And then 5th there, you'll see emerging retention. There's been a lot of stuff written about the Great Resignation. I think it's truer in some organizations and in some territories and in some categories of employee than it is in others, but there's no doubt that there's a lot of movement going on at the moment, and people analytics, which has traditionally been used to understand the causes and predicting retention, is really helping organizations navigate through a difficult phase here. So that's kind of the top areas where it adds value. One of the questions that Jonathan and I were attempting to answer in the book, and which we explored further in last year's research, was, it's a question we get asked a lot. What do the leading companies do around people analytics? And if you were there for the introduction with Dirk and Sjoerd, we talked about, historically people have talked about maturity curves in people analytics, and if you don't get your reporting right, then you can't do predictive analytics. And the reality of that we found was, when we did the research, which wasn't necessarily the case. Of course, if you want to create something sustainable, you need to have good data quality in the long term. But what we found when we looked at the leading organizations, this is the 9 dimensions model that Sjoerd kindly referred to in the introduction, was that actually the leading companies are working on all these 9 areas almost in parallel. So you continue looking at, in governance, you've got things like data standards and ethics. You're continually looking at that and refining that and making sure it's relevant for what is it that you're trying to achieve. Obviously, we're always having new data sources that we can use as part of our work. Methodology really is around prioritization as much as anything else, making sure we're working on the most important things for the business. That changes, so we need to make sure that we're reprioritizing our work in line with that. Stakeholder management really is around managing stakeholders, not just in HR, but the senior stakeholders within the business as well, who've got problems that they want to solve and are able to do something about it. Because there's nothing worse than doing a piece of people analytics work for 6 months, coming up with some great insights, people say, yeah, that's really interesting, and then just putting it in the drawer. You want people that have got problems to solve, that have the ability and the willpower to do something about it. The resources is the stuff that we think about. That's skills, both within the team and having access to skills, maybe in other analytics teams within the company. But I would include skills around HR professionals as well, technology, obviously, and data. But then ultimately, it's about value. What are the workforce experiences that we're giving to managers, to leaders, to the workforce through this? How does it positively impact the workforce and employees? What are the business outcomes? Do we measure the impact of our people analytics work? For example, if we're solving maybe attrition, if we reduce attrition by X%, how much potential savings do we make to the organization? And then culture, creating that data-driven culture in HR. And actually, when we drilled down a little bit further on some of the specifics from the research last year, and we actually studied leading companies, we found that those companies that are having the most success with people analytics across those 9 dimensions, they've got a direct influence at the CHRO level. That's through the reporting line, but they're getting investment to grow the team, to buy technology. They're getting access to the right stakeholders within the business. And if the CHRO is involved, it's sending a message to the business and HR as well that this is really important. They prioritize work on an ongoing basis, as I've said. The work is directed at the most important things that the business is facing, and you are basically organized a team to do that. So having a front end of the team of consultants who are working directly with HR business partners and business leaders to identify and prioritize the most important challenges facing the business. Then productizing. I know Dirk is particularly passionate about this because we talked about this in the podcast we did. It's a couple of years ago, I think now, wasn't it, Dirk? Not just solving one problem for one part of the business, but understanding how can we productize some of these solutions. This may be working with technology partners from the outside, but it could also be building your own solutions as well. And then thinking about that, how we would think about from a customer basis, because if you want people to use a solution, it's got to be user friendly. You've got to create it that people want to use it, that it's easy to use, that it provides them insights, that if you're a manager, okay, here's the insight. If you do X, and you can expect Y to happen, so you're driving some decisions around that. So really important if you want to scale people analytics to the different audiences within the business. We've talked about, and I'll talk about again, developing that data-driven culture within HR, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And what we see with leading companies as well, this is a field that's growing and continuing to grow. So some of the leading practitioners out there, they could work in some of the tech companies like Dirk, but they're also practitioners, maybe leading people analytics. They're sharing their insights with other people analytics teams and HR professionals as well. So you'll see plenty of those practitioners sharing those stories today. They're helping the field by doing that. And we do see the leading teams in particular are kind of not just thinking about themselves and their team, they're also thinking about the field as well. So yeah, some leading practices there. So a couple of case studies, which I think is always helpful to see. So Microsoft, you saw the quote from Kathleen Hogan earlier. Microsoft is definitely one of those teams that is sharing the work that it's doing with audience. Dawn Klinghoffer, who is the head of people analytics at Microsoft, is probably 4 or 5 times a year sharing articles in HBR and Mid-Sloan Management Review of some of the work that they're doing. And this quote that Dawn gave us, which is in the book, I think really encapsulates the growth in people analytics over the last couple of years. It's been absolutely a critical component for organizations that had developed that muscle during the pandemic. And the case in the book really focuses on how Microsoft is using employee listening. They are doing a daily pulse to 2,500 employees every day. It's not the only thing they do, but we've talked about continuous listening. well, actually sending out a survey every day. It's a short survey. It's 2 or 3 questions to 2,500 employees every day. It gives you some great insights on how employees are feeling. And particularly if we think about the last 2 years and the various stages of the pandemic, really helpful. They combine that in a listening ecosystem with lots of other active survey-based tools, but also passive data as well. So data coming from email and calendar, not content, metadata coming from there as well. And social listening as well to employees, because it really gives you that understanding of what's going on. And what Microsoft have done particularly well is they've used that through the various stages of the pandemic, and leaders within Microsoft have used those insights to make decisions around Microsoft's approach to hybrid work, for example, Microsoft's approach to the racial inequality crisis of 2020, and they combine all this data. So a great example, there was Dawn wrote a recent article in HBR. Through this analysis, they saw through their survey that they'd had a pretty significant fall in satisfaction with work-life balance towards the end of 2020. Perhaps not surprising, given that everyone was working remotely at that time. So they started to look a little bit deeper at why that was happening. So they looked at some of the collaboration data as well, and they found that there were 3 triggers: too much collaboration, lack of focus time, and not taking vacation. And then they rolled out 4 strategies to try and address this, and they rolled it out through managers, because managers most likely to have the impact to affect that change within workers. So, for example, they made managers accountable to make sure that change was systemic around prioritizing work. So giving people permission to say, actually, I've got too much on at the moment, and the manager support them with that to say, okay, well, we need to just prioritize the most important work. Reevaluating meetings, so trying to cut down on the number and frequency of meetings, protecting focus time, encouraging people to block that focus time in their calendars, and encouraging vacation. People weren't taking vacation because they were working from home, but it was telling them it was really important to do that. So that's one. And Microsoft, as we'll find out later, is also a company that's really created that data-driven culture in HR as well. This second example is a really good one, I think, for the people analytics teams out there and HR business partners as well, around how you frame the insights of people analytics work and the importance of framing it in the language of the business. So this started with a hypothesis this project started with a hypothesis from the HR team that the completion of a particular training course in the Nespresso part of Nestle, so this is the coffee, the boutiques that you see all around airports and around shopping arcades, led to the commercial success of a boutique. So i.e., if people took this training course, had a positive impact on each of those boutiques or shops. As invariably happens with people analytics, the analysis actually disproved the hypothesis. The completion of the course made no real difference to the commercial success of the boutiques. But interestingly, what this work did is it piqued the interest of business leaders within Nespresso to understand, okay, what are the people drivers that drive commercial performance in our boutiques? So the people analytics team worked with the business on a number of different hypotheses that they would test using people data. And the insight that really caught the attention was that the voluntary termination rates of boutique managers were strongly related to boutique sales performance. And they found that if they could just reduce that voluntary termination percent by 5% or more, the impact on the business of increased sales was quite significant. So the team were quite excited about this, and they communicated this to different parts of the business in Nespresso in financial terms. So you'd think in financial terms, if we reduce attrition by 5%, we save X million euros, would really resonate. It didn't resonate. So they went away and they thought, what's the language that will really resonate with all parts of Nespresso, whether that's boutique managers, the boutique area managers themselves, whether that's leaders in the business, whether that's our manufacturing business, whether that's our finance. And interestingly, it was, if you framed it in the number of additional coffee capsules sold, then suddenly it really resonated. So the story was changed. The actions were taken to try and reduce attrition, and the millions or more coffee capsules that were sold as a result. And what this did, by framing the story in quite simple terms, it really drove a huge interest and demand from the Nespresso business for people analytics and supported the growth of the function there. So, I mean, I suppose the lesson coming out of that is, framing insights in the language of the business and telling a good story can have a really positive impact on what we're doing. So I've talked a lot about data-driven culture. So a big focus of the research that we did last year was on data-driven culture and the importance of that to the success of people analytics within organizations. And what was interesting, actually, of the 114 companies that participated in this, 90% told us that, the CHRO has communicated that people, or believes that people analytics is a core component of HR strategy. So that's pretty good. But only 42% of those companies said that they currently had a data-driven culture in HR. And then again, because we're framing it from a people analytics perspective, we wanted to understand, what are people analytics leaders themselves? Do they feel responsible for this? And whilst they might not set the vision or the strategy for the data-driven culture that may come from the CHRO, 60% of people analytics leaders felt it was their role, their responsibility for helping create a data-driven culture, which is interesting because all the people analytics leaders I know are usually, they've got too much work on, and they've got this additional responsibility to upskill HR as well. So it can be really, really challenging in that perspective. So we dug a little bit deeper in the research as well. And again, this echoed some of the stuff that Jonathan and I found in the book. If you were going to invest in creating that data-driven culture today, let's say we've got a CHRO or a member of the HR leadership team here today, or maybe even a people analytics leader themselves that who's looking to actually kind of drive this within their organization. So our research found three interlocking elements that, and all three need to be managed together to kind of create this data-driven culture. And then I'll bring this to life with an example from IBM afterwards. So firstly, you've got to invest. Funnily enough, the leading teams invest in people analytics. So that's investing in the team. So investing in the team in terms of skills. So that's the front-end consultants, data analysts, data engineers, maybe NLP experts, depending on the size of your team. Governance, data management, if that's a responsibility for the people analytics team, definitely investing in that. Ethics, people related to that. And then back to my comment around productization, looking at UI, people that understand user UI and user experience, and building those into creating some of the products that you will develop that you want people to use. So investment in the team is one area. If you're in a smaller company, you may not be able to invest in one place, i.e. in people analytics, if that's based in HR. So having access to some of those skills elsewhere in the organization, in other analytics teams, or maybe partnering with outside external teams to get some of those skills as well. Investing in specialized technologies. There are there's a lot of choice around technology, but the leading teams are investing in technology, specialist technology that helps them do people analytics, that helps with data democratization, that maybe helps really bring insights to not just to HR business partners, but to managers in the business as well. And some of those technologies then help you tackle some of those more complex business imperatives as well. And again, as I said, investing in that productization area as well for scale and usability. Then how do we embed that data-driven decision-making across HR business partners and managers? So again, number one, democratizing that data across the company, making data accessible and making it available in easy-to-use tools. Upskilling HR professionals, especially HR business partners, because they're the ones typically closest to the business, in areas such as analytical thinking, storytelling, data literacy, and maybe consulting and influencing skills as well. And then supporting that change management process in HR, clear communications from the CHRO, and again, the example from IBM, I think will support that. And incentivizing career journeys that take that data-driven approach. Making it clear that the HR business partner of the future within your organization needs to have be data-driven and analytical skills is important. That doesn't mean becoming a data scientist. That just means being able to think analytically and tell stories with data. And then finally, again, really important, and again, not so many organizations are doing this at the moment, demonstrating the business value of people analytics, looking to try and calculate where you can return on investment on some of the work that you're doing. And ways to do that is working with finance at the outset, really, to agree how you're going to measure the value of a particular piece of work, and then following that through. If you get finance on board, then those figures will start to resonate with the organization as well. Prioritizing stakeholders, we talked about prioritization being important, and that really powerful triumvirate between business leaders, HR business partners, and the people analytics team, and communicating the value of data-driven HR and people analytics across the company. Microsoft do this quite simply through their intranet that they use, #data-driven HR. Any insight that's coming out from people analytics that's delivering value to the business that they want to communicate to the business, #data-driven HR. So quite simple. So one organization that's done this well, and many of you will know, I worked there for a couple of years, IBM. So IBM is one of those companies that have been doing people analytics for a long time. The team was established in 2010. And actually quite early on, back in 2012, I think it was, 700 HR business partners were given training around people analytics. Now, creating a data-driven culture, training is important, but it's not just about training. There's got to be a little bit more about that. So at IBM, and you can listen to this in the podcast episode I did with Anshul Shiapuri, who's led people analytics as the Chief Technology Officer for HR at IBM just before Christmas on the Digital HR Leaders podcast. He talked about how, right from the top, from the CHRO within IBM, a real clear vision, being really clear on the North Star, that we are creating a data-driven function, and we're going to support you as HR professionals to acquire the skills that you need, but you're expected to do this as part of your job as well. Making clear that not only is data literacy strategically important to HR professionals, it's strategically important to IBM as a business as well. And then not just, walk the talk, so the CHRO and the HR leadership team, senior leaders within HR, they also need to embody that data-driven approach, and be shown to do that to the rest of the HR function as well. Obviously, investing in the right tools to democratize data. In IBM, that's building a lot of that technology in-house. In other organizations, that will be maybe building some, but going out and buying some of the best technology out there to support that work. Boot camps to upskill HR professionals, so not just practical as well, allowing people to, in a safe space, get dirty with the data, if you will, get their hands dirty with the data if you want, and start to understand, one of the boot camps that we've built for teams at the moment, it creates a number of different data sources, and people need to select the right data sources that match the problem they're trying to solve. And, allowing people to fail as well, by doing the boot camps, obviously people can fail and learn from that as well, but allowing people to fail anyway, and supporting them in that continuous learning journey as well. And then by delivering business impact, and communicating that business impact. And as Anshul said there, when you have all hands with the CHRO, celebrating those people within the team who are actually demonstrating that data-driven culture, so they act as an example to the rest of the organization as well. So in short, to create that data-driven culture, it does take time. It does require that clarity of vision from the CHRO down. It does require that partnership between people analytics and HR professionals, and it requires continual effort. You don't create a culture by doing something once. So it's really important that you keep up at that. So I thought we'd end today, and I know the panel at the end of the day is going to focus a little bit around the future of people analytics. So this is the third part of excellence in people analytics. We looked, what's next for people analytics? What do we think is going to happen over the next 5 years? And some of this is already happening. I would add a fifth to this. The fifth one is really around how people analytics is helping shape the future workplace, the hybrid workplace. People analytics teams have been involved in helping companies kind of work out what that's going to be. And then hopefully as we start to go back into the office more and more this year, let's hope that happens, people analytics teams will be important for measuring the effectiveness of those hybrid work approaches to hybrid work within their organizations, and nuancing that and helping organizations change that where possible. But the 4 areas that we really focused on in the epilogue of the book, one was around human experience at work. So there's been lots of work around employee experience. We see this as almost being the next step of employee experience and rescaling that across the organization, using analytics to really develop programs for what the workforce and tools across the enterprise. And it kind of shift HR from being an arbiter of processes to a creator of offerings and experiences for the workforce, a very different place to where HR has been, and analytics is right at the heart of that. It's great because Mikhail's going to be talking next about skills, and the skills conundrum, if we want to call that, is a top 3 challenge for CEOs. People analytics teams are at the heart of that shift from a focus on jobs to a much deeper analysis of skills. It's just reshaping workforce planning, but also bringing skills, learning and careers together. And we're seeing that in organizations, and I expect to see that much more across the board in the next 3 to 5 years. Investor demand. So big thing here, if we look at things like the ISO Human Capital Metric Standard, we look at what the Security and Exchange Commission has been doing in the US around mandating disclosure of human capital information by all companies. It's a huge opportunity for people analytics and HR to help shift human capital from an intangible to more of a tangible asset through data and meet investor demand. And if we think the power of how we can attract great talent to our organization through being transparent about diversity, equity and inclusion data, for example. But investors are going to make decisions, or they already are making decisions on which companies to invest in based on some of the metrics coming out of human capital, and I expect to see more of that. And then finally, about improving society, a lot of people analytics work to date has really been focused on driving better outcomes within the business. I think is the focus on diversity and inclusion in particular, but also if we think about climate change, if we think about social responsibility, it does expand that conversation, I think, to using people analytics to support the wider communities that we serve as organizations. So I think I'm 1 minute over, so I do apologize for that. If you want to stay in touch, there's a weekly newsletter you can subscribe to there, and do follow me on LinkedIn. I'm fortunate that I share a lot of collate quite a lot of content in the space and share that on a monthly basis. So if you want to find out what's going on in people analytics, then that might be a good place to start. I don't capture everything, but hopefully most of the stuff out there I do capture. So Dirk, I'll come to you.
Great. David, thanks again for sharing some super powerful insights. I really love the story that you shared of Jordan Petman. I mean, he is a great storyteller. It all comes back to the fact that people forget metrics, but they remember stories. So my takeaway, talk Nespresso cups and avoid HR metrics. There's quite a few questions in the chat. Looking at the time, I would like to take 1 or 2. The first question is from Ines, and she has an interesting question on adoption. So she's saying, like, HR people decided to work in HR because they love to work with people and not so much with numbers. So do you have any tips on how to convince them in a fast way that data is part of their new job?
Yeah, it's true. I think that, there is that story that some of us come into HR because we don't like numbers. I think, well, it's changing. And, so I suppose if you want to be a really successful HR professional moving forward, you're going to have to embrace this. But organizations need to help their HR professionals to do this. I think stories like that one from Nestle is a great example, because ultimately we also come into HR because we want to support our workforces. We want to act as a partner to the business, and data helps us do that more effectively. So we're not saying that you need to be a data scientist or an analyst. I think all we're saying is ask good questions, find out what the challenges are that, in the organization, work with your people analytics team to kind of use data to try and answer some of those questions, and then take insights. You don't need to show them complicated graphs, as Dirk said, so people won't remember that. Frame it into language that really resonates, and do it in partnership with your people analytics team. If people want to dig deeper on the numbers, you don't need to do that, because there should be someone in the people analytics team with you, to particularly initially as you're learning to do that. And don't be afraid to fail. Learn from your mistakes. learn from others in the organization that maybe are more numerate and like numbers, and understand how it's helping them. But don't be scared. It's probably the best tip.
I fully agree with you. There's many more questions in the chat, but given the time, I think we will wrap this up.